Well, good morning, everybody. I am Reverend Ben Jamison. I am your associate minister here, and it is a thrill to see the house as full as it is. Thank you all for being here. You know, here at Centers for Spiritual Living, we have 7 core values that we use to guide our focus and our practice. And those 7 core values are love, healing, oneness, abundance, spiritual growth, service, and diversity. Today we're focusing on oneness. You know, typically when we talk about oneness, we do it from the principle of there being one life. There's one life expressing as all of us, seemingly separate individuals, but it's still the one life living all of us, so that I can't do anything to myself that I don't do to others, and I cannot serve another without also serving myself. And yet oneness goes far beyond just this idea. If we look, we can find oneness really anywhere, even in something as disparate seeming as religion. You see, when we get rid of all of the cultural and time periods that different religions came from, we'll find the same inspiration back of all of them, the same intention to bring us home to the loving that we already are. That's why we have the Flames of Faith ceremony here every month, to help remind us that there are a diversity of spiritual paths and practices. Last week we did the Flames of Faith. Last week was also Easter and the end of Passover. This week is the beginning of Ramadan. We have an auspicious time of holy celebration and oneness that we've been in these past couple weeks and will continue to be in. So as we focus on oneness this week, regardless of whether or not a particular religion or spiritual path works for you, bring to mind the fact that if you look at a wheel, there's one hub, the home that we're all going to. And the spokes, though they seem different, all bring us back to that one home of love that we already are. Here's to your oneness and my oneness with all of life this week. Namaste. So once upon a time, there was this quaint little village. It was a small village. Everybody who lived there knew everybody else. It was the type of village that you were born there, lived there, grew up there, and died there. It was really a wonderfully connected community. And there was one person who lived in this village, an old man who was very cantankerous. He was the most unpleasant person in the entire village. He was angry and upset all the time. In fact, nobody wanted to spend any time with this man, and they could tell when they needed to clear the area because they could feel the energy drop as he approached. Then one day, he had his 80th birthday. And after his 80th birthday, rumors spread that he was suddenly happy. Nobody really believed the rumors, so they would carefully walk by his house, and sure enough, there he was, sitting in his front yard, smiling and waving at people. Nobody could fathom what had happened until finally, somebody got up the nerve to go and ask him. And they said, "What happened? You were always so unpleasant, so unhappy, and now here you are, joyful. What changed?" And he said, "Well, you know, I spent my entire life looking for happiness. I looked here and there and everywhere, and I couldn't find it. And the more I looked and didn't find it, the more unhappy I became. And then I turned 80, and I decided that I had failed, and I would never find happiness. So I decided to stop looking and enjoy the life I had." We're all looking for happiness in one way or another, aren't we? In fact, it seems like it's even written into our cultural consciousness here in America. The Declaration of Independence says we have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We got a right to life and liberty, not a right to happiness, but a right to pursue happiness. And when we look at the word pursuit, what is a pursuit? It's a chase, it's a hunt, it's a seeking after. And of course, if you are hunting something and you get what you're hunting, the pursuit ceases, right? But we're guaranteed this pursuit of happiness, this unending looking for happiness. Now, I'm not saying this to criticize the writers of the Declaration of Independence, not by any stretch. I'm saying it to bring to mind what our cultural consciousness around happiness seems to be, and to ask a question. How's the pursuit going for you? Pretty non-ending, isn't it? I mean, granted, every once in a while we might stop and take a look at life and realize that there's really a lot of good there and feel a little bit happy for a little while until we pick up the pursuit again. In fact, one of the greatest, wisest, inspirational minds in the 80s about living in the moment and happiness said this: "Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop to look around every once in a while, you could miss it." Ferris Bueller, right? But there's really something to that, because this pursuit of happiness has us in a bind. And there is another way to come at happiness. In fact, we're exploring that all month with our book of the month entitled Radical Happiness, written by two individuals, Phakchok Rinpoche and Eric Solomon. One of them, a Buddhist monk and meditation master, and the other, a high-powered tech executive from Silicon Valley. Two people in very different worlds coming together to talk about happiness. But before we explore what they say, let's look a little bit more at what our consciousness tends to be around this idea of radical happiness. If I were to say to you, describe radical happiness to me, I'm guessing that your brain might do something similar to what my brain does. So here's what my brain does when I say, what's radical happiness? Well, radical happiness would mean that I am happy all the time, that there's a constant state of bliss and joy. I'm smiling, I'm laughing, and nothing can disturb my peace. It doesn't matter what's happening out in the world, because I know that there is a grand plan and everything is perfect, and so I just stay joyful and blissful all the time. Anybody else have that idea kind of working in their consciousness a little bit? It's a pretty tall order, right? Well, let's look at some other people and see how well we're doing, what sort of a chance we have of making this goal. Two people who have been determined to be ascended spiritual masters from different cultures. First one is Jesus. We'll take a look at him. You know, there's this story in the Bible about how he sat down and wove his own whip so that he could go violently assault people in the temple and destroy their property as he overturned all of their tables. Doesn't sound like somebody who's too blissed out to me, right? Krishna, the Christ of India, there's a story about him where he got so mad at somebody that he cursed that person to forever seek for death but never be able to find it. Doesn't seem too happy to me, right? So here we have this idea of happiness that even ascended spiritual masters couldn't maintain, and we're really setting ourselves up for failure. Of course, if we look at those stories metaphysically, we get a whole other meaning, but the point remains, we need to shift our understanding of what radical happiness is. We can look, too, at how society thinks we're going to get this high level of radical happiness. Again, my brain would do something like this. It would say, well, in order for me to have that experience of happiness where I'm blissed out all the time, I would never have to do anything that I personally don't want to do, which would mean that I would have the money to hire people to wash my car and mow my lawn and clean my house, and I would never have to worry about doing any of those things because that's not really my joy and my bliss. And at the same time, I'd want to be able to do whatever I wanted to do whenever I wanted to do it, which would mean I wouldn't have to go to a job, so I would have to already have enough money to fund my life and pay everybody to do everything. And I love travel, but international travel through airports is kind of a pain in the butt, so I'd have to be able to fly privately the entire time. And once I get to where I'm going, I'd want the fanciest phone so I could really document it, right? It's all about stuff and things and money and stuff and things and money and stuff and things and stuff and things. And there are certainly people out in the world who have that ability. And yet the most well-balanced of them understand that their money does not bring them their happiness. You know, Tony Robbins owns a private island and a private jet and is worth $400 million or something like that. And he talks all the time about contribution, 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 contribution being the source of his happiness. Not the money, not the island, not the jet. So what does the monk and the tech executive say about radical happiness? They say that instead of this idea that happiness means we're never going to be out of our peace ever, that radical happiness is rather an experience of contentment in the midst of whatever is happening around us. It's quite a different idea than what we tend to have in Western culture, right? There's two types of happiness that they say come together to breed this radical happiness. The first of those they call basic happiness. And basic happiness comes from having a focus more in the present moment. That might seem really simple, but when we think about it, it really is profound guidance. If we go back to this grand idea of happiness that says I'm never out of my bliss, I'm never off my center, When do we typically find ourselves losing our peace? It's really when we're doing one of two things, either living in the past or living in the future. And we tend to do these in two different ways. If I'm living in the past, I'm either recalling a terrible, awful memory that I had before, which is generating an experience of me being off-center, or I'm thinking about some blissful experience from the past and going, oh, if only that could be in my present moment, my life would be so much better. Or if we're in the future, we're negative future fantasizing about some horrible thing that may happen. Or we're daydreaming about some fanciful life and then comparing that to our present moment and saying, God, life would be so much better if only the private jet. So no matter what we're doing, we've got this focus on negativity, and we've got it in the past or the future, which is not where we have any power. The only place we have any power to affect any change is in the present moment, right here and right now. So when we have a present moment focus, even in the midst of things that are uncomfortable, it leaves us with really only two options. Either in the moment, there is something that I can do to have a positive impact on the situation, which means I just go and do that thing and have a positive impact on the situation, or there's nothing I can do in this moment to have a positive impact, so there's nothing to worry about. All that is there to do is to be present, because there's nothing else to do, and worrying won't make it any better. There's an odd level of contentment that comes when we know there's either something to do and we're going to do it, or there's not, so we might as well not worry, rather than putting our power outside of ourselves and bringing this negative experience into our bodies. The second type of happiness is interconnected happiness. And this comes from having our actions informed by the needs of others. When we bring these two types of happiness together, this is what the authors say about radical happiness. They say, at the moment when thoughts for others' well-being fill our mind, our normal self-centered way of thinking has completely dissolved. Then, if we have been training ourselves in being present, we can experience ourselves and the world around us in a radically different way, unhindered by our usual habitual patterns of thoughts and emotions. This way of being is the essence of radical happiness. Unhindered by our typical, usual, habitual patterns of thoughts and emotions. Eric Solomon, the tech executive, gives a great example of how this radical happiness works. In his own life, he was at one point in time the VP of a new startup, and it was going well. Everybody was rolling in dough, at least in terms of stock options, and everybody had these grand plans for their life. Everything was fantastic. And then, as can happen in tech startups, the stocks crashed. Suddenly, everybody went overnight from having a ton of stock to basically worthless paper. And he found himself stressing out about the huge mortgage that he had, about all of the plans that he now had to cancel, about the future life that he had been envisioning that now was in question. And it was a week of turmoil for him. Until, he says in the book, at 5 a.m., seemingly out of the blue, his meditation teacher called and said two things. He said to him, right now, everything is fine. Don't think too much about yourself, and hung up the phone. Right then, at 5 in the morning, everything was fine. Nothing was wrong, other than the fact that he was awakened at 5 in the morning when he wanted to sleep, but there was nothing wrong in that moment. So he woke up and he started thinking about what the teacher had said, and he realized that over the last week, there were really two occasions in which he was not completely stressed out. One is when he was meditating, so present moment focused, and the other is when he was helping his team, the people who didn't have a VP salary, to navigate the challenging times. When he was in the present moment or focusing on helping others. And once again, this idea of focusing on helping others is really as profound as being in the present moment. Because what would happen if we were to do that? Let's say I am in a stressful experience about my own life and I'm spinning in, oh my God, what's going to happen now? What's going to happen now with this, that, and the other thing, and all the terribleness that's coming to me? And I say, wait a second, let me put this down for a moment and see how I can make somebody else's life better. The moment I do that, I'm no longer living in the future, which means I'm not disempowering myself. I'm no longer spinning in a negative future fantasy, which means I'm no longer attracting that to myself. And instead, I have focused on how I can help somebody else. In doing that, since it's not my own stuff, it's a lot easier for us to be more present and powerful and creative when we're helping other people than when we're stuck in our own stuff, right? So suddenly I have more access to greater ideas. I'm able to help somebody else. And as I'm helping, having a positive contribution to somebody else's life or the world in general, I start to build this momentum, this powerful momentum of having a positive change. And then when I'm recentered, I can come back and focus on my stuff from this place of, look at all the good that's been done, look at all the progress that I've made. Now, how can I bring the same creativity to what I've got to work on with myself? But there's another piece of it too. You remember that core value of oneness this morning, right? Well, I cannot serve somebody else without serving myself as well. But even more than that, this aligns us with our divine nature. Our divine nature is spirit. And what is spirit doing? Spirit is constantly giving of itself. Giving. That's its nature. It gives of itself to itself so that its expressions in the world can grow and prosper and be happy. So to the degree that we put down our stuff and help somebody else, we are doing the same thing. We are giving and aligning with our divine natures. And when we do that, have you noticed how grace tends to come in a little bit? How things kind of seem to realign themselves a little bit in our favor? Present moment focus. How can I serve others? You know, we can engage in this in really simple ways. Of course, if we're looking at helping other people, we just have to notice that we're stuck in our own stuff and ask the question, how can I put this down and make a difference in somebody else's life right now? Maybe it's calling a friend you haven't talked to just to say hi, or writing a thank you note, or getting a trash bag and going for a walk and picking up trash that you see on the side of the road to help beautify our community for everybody else. Whatever it is that you can do, put down your stuff and find a way to make somebody else's life better. That's an action we have to take. When it comes to being more present-minded, focused, the Rinpoche gives a great story that helps us in this regard as well. When he was a young man, he found himself angry most of the time and went to his meditation teacher and said, "What should I do about this?" And the teacher said, "Well, you need to stop being a dog and start being a lion." He said, "Well, what do you mean by that?" The teacher said, "If you throw a stone at a dog, what happens?" He said, "Well, the dog chases after the stone." He said, "That's right. And you are chasing every single thought that comes into your head just like a dog stays chasing a stone. You're chasing all of the thoughts, chasing. If you throw a stone at a lion, what happens? Well, that lion turns around and looks at you. And then what? Well, you either run away or get eaten, in which case there are no more stones being thrown." He says, exactly. Stop being a dog, start being a lion. Turn around and look at the thoughts that are coming into your head. It's a really interesting practice, one that I have applied in my own life to really interesting and wonderful success. When I find myself spinning in a negative future fantasy or something from the past, if I simply stop, become present, and turn around, of course not physically, but internally, turn around and look at the source of those thoughts and say, okay, I'm present now, I'm ready, give me your best shot. And I wait. And I wait. And I wait. And as long as I am looking at the source of the thought and waiting, it never comes. Because there is no independent source of the thought. It's just our brain spinning and doing what it does when we're not paying attention. And so the second we bring ourselves into paying attention and look for the thought to come and wait for it, it's going to stop. Give it a shot. See how it works for you. The more we do this, the more we're able to bring that present-minded awareness when there's not random thoughts running through our head. Be a lion. Turn and look at the thoughts to stop them. And then ask yourself, how can I serve somebody else? Now, this idea of radical happiness, of happiness just being a present moment contentment in the face of whatever is going on, is really great to talk about and to intend to adopt, but it's a different thing all entirely when we're actually faced with a race consciousness that looks at happiness as being provided by stuff and things, and that is this perpetual state of bliss. So there's something we can do when we find ourselves stuck in that experience as well. A lot of people have said this quote in a lot of different ways. Ernest Holmes in The Science of Mind says it this way: what we are looking for, we are looking with. So when you find yourself looking for happiness out in the world from stuff and things, remember, stuff and things do not provide happiness. They may help us remember that happiness is within us. They may give us the temporary permission to acknowledge the source of happiness within our own being, but they are not the source of that happiness. And if what we are looking for, we are looking with, then we have the opportunity to again be the lion, to turn and look. Because if we turn within and look for a source of happiness, a source of joy, of peace, of love, of bliss, of gratitude, we'll find it. Because there is an independent source of all of those things. That is spirit itself. That is the life that we live. And if we turn to look at what we're looking with, that happiness will wash over us. It may be in a trickle at first, but the more we turn, the more we look for the source of happiness and contentment within us, the more we will find it, and the more it will flood our beings. Friends, we have the rest of this month to explore this idea of radical happiness, of how we can bring ourselves into the present moment, focus on serving others, and remembering that the source of happiness is already within us. Here's to you and your happiness. Namaste. So we have a moment now to engage together in a spiritual practice. And so I invite you to find yourself, whether you're in the room or online, in a comfortable position, and allow your eyes to close, to turn your attention within, and let the music bring you into a deep centered space.
I breathe out. I breathe in, I am still, I go within, when I quiet my mind, in stillness I find, Spirit meets me there, Spirit meets me there.
So with our attention turned within, we can begin to deepen into that centered space where there is only one life, the life that birthed all of us and lives all of us in perfect harmony. It's so easy to get confused, to think that stuff and things bring us happiness, to think that other people bring us love. The truth is, anything in the physical world is just a reminder of the love we already are, of the peace that already is. And so as we turn our attention within, knowing that within us there is a limitless source of contentment, we can take time together this morning in a meditative silence to look for that source of contentment and to sit back and allow it to wash over us. In this moment, let's be the lion and turn to look at contentment from within. Breathing into that contented space, feeling it deeply. We recognize that it will not eliminate our struggles, but is always there for us in the midst of them. In gratitude for this ever-present contentment that is there for me as I turn to it, I take a deep breath of gratitude and allow my attention to shift back into my body, feeling my fingers and my toes, allowing the breath to bring me back present. And when I'm ready, allowing my eyes to open and be here now.
I breathe out, I breathe in, I am still, I go within, when I quiet my mind, in the stillness I find, Spirit meets me there, Spirit meets me there.
You have an affirmation card on your chair. It looks a little bit like this. This card is something you can take home and use throughout the week to help engage you in the spiritual practice of affirmations, and we'll kick it off together right now. So repeat with me together. I experience the ever-present joy of Spirit flowing from within me. And let's take that and turn for a moment within to an affirmative prayer of spiritual mind treatment. For what we know is that there is only one life, one presence, and one power. That this power is whole, complete, and perfect. It is filled with joy and flows through us with joy. That there is a source of happiness. That happiness comes from within, and that inner contentment is available to us always and forever. This source of happiness and joy and contentment within doesn't mean that we will never have challenges or struggles in our life, but it means that we will always have the support we need to move through our life in a place of confidence, in a place of contentment, in a place of knowing the highest good for ourselves is being done as we bring our spirituality and our magnificence to whatever is right in front of us. In this week, as we set the intention to remain focused in the present moment and ask how I can make somebody else's life better, I know that grace flows in and guides everything to a week of joy, of peace, of happiness and abundance. For all of this good and all the good yet to be, I give my thanks, and I unleash this word into the law, knowing that it is done, and so it is. Amen. Thank you all for being here. We are so grateful, whether you're in the house or online. Make sure you join us next week, 10 a.m. for meditation, online or in the house, and 10:30 for service. Until then, remember, the source of happiness is you. Be that lion. Look for it. You'll find it. Have a great week. Namaste.
Thank you for watching, and thanks for supporting CSL. If you'd like to know more about us, check us out on our website or social media. Blessings.